In an industry where even great creators often remain anonymous, game designer, producer, and director Shigeru Miyamoto has rightfully achieved superstar status. As the creative mind behind such revolutionary franchises as Super Mario, The Legend of Zelda, and Donkey Kong, Miyamoto has helped turn Nintendo into a company synonymous with the very idea of video games. Yet, despite the massive success of his games in North America, the very first game that Miyamoto ever designed exclusively for the NES Famicom console wasn't ported to the US for decades. In fact, despite being released in Japan in 1984, this Miyamoto didn't hit North America until 2023. Why? Believe it or not, it's Satan's fault. Shigeru Miyamoto's first console game was a satanic version of Pac-Man. Devil World is a 1984 Famicom puzzle game that supports up to 2 players. It casts you as a green dragon, or a red dragon if you're player 2, named Tamagon, who must attack the Devil's World. The basic gameplay sees you try to collect all of the magic dots scattered throughout each level. Standing in your way are various demons that can kill you by touch. The only way to defend yourself is to collect crosses that allow you to breathe fire. Once you've collected all the dots in a level, you'll be asked to locate 4 Bibles. Yes, you heard that right. That allow you to reach the Devil's Caves. Manage to drop the Bibles off in the right areas, and you'll move on to a bonus stage. The game pretty much repeats that basic stage progression pattern after you've finished that section. Presiding over the action is none other than the Devil. He soon proves to be quite the nuisance. Not only does he direct his various minions from the top of the screen, via dancing, just as the townsfolk in Footloose warned us would happen,
leaping and dancing,
but he occasionally forces the walls of a level to literally close in on you. No, this isn't the kind of game you'd expect from family-friendly Nintendo, and Miyamoto has rarely talked about Devil World. One of the only interviews where he addresses the game in depth comes from the book Bits and Pieces, A History of Chiptunes, in which he talks about the game's soundtrack, which was crafted by none other than famous Nintendo composer Koji Kondo. He's never shed any significant light on the inspirations for the game's somewhat bizarrely over-religious imagery. The lack of any official information, at least from Miyamoto himself, on that subject is just one of the things that makes the whole project so fascinating. One of the only other notable interviews regarding the game's development comes from Takashi Tezuka, the legendary Nintendo designer and director who first collaborated with Miyamoto while working with him on Devil World. He notes that Miyamoto had a, quote, strong basic idea of the image he was after for that game. However, he doesn't go into greater detail about the inspiration for or thought process behind those images. There have always been cultural differences between Japan and the US when it comes to such imagery in video games, though Japanese games from that era rarely used religious imagery and concepts in any kind of overtly offensive way. Traditional religious symbols were typically used as thematic window dressing, or as a way to sell/enhance certain aspects of some title's lore. Even the original version of The Legend of Zelda allowed players to equip a Bible. Why would an otherwise pretty standard fantasy game bother to incorporate things like crosses and Bibles in the first place? There's a rumor that Miyamoto flew to America to try to convince the Nintendo of America team that they should release Devil World in North America, but he had to have known that was never going to happen. The US was in the thick of the Satanic Panic era, and there was no way that Nintendo was going to release a game that so prominently featured religious imagery at that time. Still, Nintendo could have simply changed a few things about Devil World and released the game in North America. It's not Miyamoto's best game, but it was certainly worth a port, such as the one that EU gamers eventually got in 1987. Before finally releasing in the US in 2023, the game was referenced via trophies in Super Smash Bros. Some even suggest that the game's main character may have been the design inspiration for Yoshi, which is a loose theory at best, but not an absurd one. Historically, it has to be the most significant Nintendo game that is rarely ever talked about or even acknowledged by its own creators. Fortunately, Nintendo of America has finally given the gamers what they want, making Devil World available as part of Nintendo Switch online subscriptions. If you're a subscriber, you can experience this piece of gaming history right now. Have you ever played Devil World? What did you think after finally playing Miyamoto's lost game? What do you think was the inspiration behind it? Read a longer version of this story on denofgeek.com.